It is my pleasure to welcome all of you for the first session of the second day. And we have our moderators already and all the panelists as well. So I will directly, without taking any time, I'll hand it over to the moderator, sir, and he'll be proceeding.
Thank you. I'm Philip Clayton. Professor Chowdhury was not able to come. We've been asked, well, we were slowed down by the only person at this place who could have taken the room from you all, the Vice Chancellor. So there was no questions about the authority of the takeover. Each speaker is going to hold himself or herself carefully to 15 minutes. And inshallah, we will have time at the end for maybe a question or two. But the speakers, we really want, they've traveled far or joined us by Zoom far, and we want to make sure they're there. So Kate, are you comfortable strictly limiting your time to 15?
Yes, Dr. Valkenburg and I are good with that being at 15 minutes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see Valkenburg's name. Yes, so our speakers, as you see in your program, are Professor Kate Kelly Middleton and Dr. Pim Valkenburg. And with no more further ado, I invite you guys to go ahead. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Can you see the slide deck?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so this presentation is a sequel to a paper that we gave 3 years ago at the Hizmet Conference in Long Beach, California. In that paper, we asked how participants in the Hizmet movement, as well as other Christians and Muslim peace builders in the Washington, D.C. region, looked at hope and resilience as virtues that help them to promote interreligious dialogue under difficult circumstances. In research of Christian and Muslim practitioners, what emerged were common themes, habits that move people from fear to hoping. When people experienced fear, they reached out to God to learn from sources in their tradition, and they reached out to trusted people in their lives. The connection between these three actions of reaching out has shaped how we are thinking about the dialogues in which we participate. In particular, the need for people to reach out to trusted persons has become a shared focal point for both Hizmet and dialogues we are a part of in the U.S. In this sequel, we want to reflect upon social friendships as one of the means that helps people in the Hizmet movement and some of the Catholics and Muslims involved in different forms of Christian-Muslim dialogue in the U.S. to sustain their dialogue and service work. The Roman Catholic Church in the U.S. has been in dialogue with several Muslim organizations for a good number of years. Both Dr. Valkenburg and I are Catholics who have been active in this social movement, a Catholic-Muslim interreligious dialogue. Both its formal dialogue, the National Catholic-Muslim Dialogue, and a more theologically focused offshoot, Scholars in Dialogue. This social effort has, in recent years, faced significant challenges of sustainability, with the NCMD members articulating a need for relevant public witness and deeper relationships between its dialogue members. We have also been privileged to be a part of and observe the meaningful work done by members and entities of the Hizmet movement, both on the East and West Coast of the U.S. Through this shared work, we have come to hypothesize that sustained relationships and public witnessing are strengths of the Hizmet movement. These strengths are valued and sought by the Catholic-Muslim interreligious dialogue. In 2024, we invited the members of the NCMD to reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of their institutional form of dialogue. A useful instrument of analyzing these strengths and weaknesses is the distinction between 4 levels or forms of interreligious dialogue, made popular by the 1984 church document, The Attitude of the Church Toward Followers of Other Religions, Reflections and Orientations on Dialogue and Mission. The following forms of dialogue are distinguished. I'll turn it to Pim.
Thank you very much, Dr. Middleton. I hope you can hear me. So there are 4 forms of dialogue in this document. Some of you might be very familiar with it. First is the dialogue of life, where people live together, and in this way it forms the basis of other forms of dialogue. The second, dialogue of works, where people work together for specific social goals. The third kind of dialogue is probably the most familiar, the dialogue of experts, where theologians, church leaders, mosque leaders, imams, sheikhs come together in the case of Christian-Muslim dialogue to discuss things that they find important. And then fourth and finally, there is the dialogue of religious experience, which is at a deeper level talking about the roots of our engagement with each other and with the larger society. While the notion of dialogue and the evaluations of this notion are usually concentrated on the dialogue of experts, of which the dialogue between religious leaders is often seen as a special subcategory, our experience in these several dialogues has taught us that it is important to keep the forms of dialogue not in isolation, but in communication.
The NCMD is a form of dialogue of experts, but has from its beginning also tried to reach out to social goals usually associated with the dialogue of works. The Scholars in Dialogue group is a dialogue of experts with a clear focus on theological exchange, but has developed an aspect of the dialogue of life as well as in developing friendships.
The National Catholic Muslim Dialogue has a relatively long history, starting as 3 regional dialogues, the oldest being dialogue co-sponsored by the Islamic Society of North America in the Midwest of the United States. Next, the dialogue in the Mid-Atlantic region from Washington, D.C. to New York, co-sponsored by the Islamic Circle of North America. And finally, the West Coast Dialogue, co-sponsored by a number of regional Sunni and Shia Muslim organizations. Because these dialogues were regional, they emphasized personal relationships. For instance, in the Midwest Dialogue, representatives from different cities, Milwaukee, Chicago, would come as a Catholic and Muslim partner. I also vividly remember that when I joined the Mid-Atlantic Dialogue in 2007, the Catholic co-chair, Bishop Dennis Madden, enthusiastically welcomed and embraced his co-chair from ICNA. That level of friendship became more difficult after the 3 regional dialogue merged into one national dialogue in 2015. Even though some participants have come to all dialogues since, financial constraints and a lack of continuity in participation made it difficult to maintain the same level of friendship and basic trust.
The NCMD has, in recent years, articulated a need not only for society to better understand social friendship, but an internal need to better understand and live out this virtue. In the days and then months immediately following the October 7, 2023 massacre and the violence in Gaza that followed, a breach of relationship happened within the dialogue. Through a series of events with a variety of reasons given, a week before our annual dialogue in November 2023, the dialogue was canceled. The national meeting was to have focused on Muslim Catholic understandings of fraternity, something profoundly needed at the time. The inability for seasoned, committed members to come together in the same room spoke to the overwhelming effect of the conflict, with many members not knowing how to react to the unknown future. How long would this large-scale violence continue? How many would suffer following the violence in Israel and the resulting strikes on the Hizmet people? For the National Catholic Muslim Dialogue, the silence represented a clear failure to sustain dialogue. A breach of relationality occurred. When dialogue members began to reach out to one another, there was hurt and a desire to do things differently. First, the group assessed in community our challenges, anxieties, fears, and barriers through fraternal and open communication. We then moved to reestablish the dialogue's priorities. 4 priorities were named. 1, relationship building within the dialogue itself. 2, developing educational resources to support local efforts. Public witnessing. And finally, building networks outside of the dialogue. With this renewed prioritization of building relationships, the NCMD began a years-long study of social friendship. And what has thus far emerged from this experience is the dialogue starting to reach out to incorporate elements of dialogue of religious experience. We will tell more about the shift in the dialogue to religious experience once we analyze a bit the Hizmet movement in the U.S. through the framework of dialogue types. How do we characterize the dialogue by the Hizmet movement? There is a clear link between dialogue of life, dialogue of works, and dialogue of experts, with elements of dialogue of religious experience largely implicit. In the 2025 North America Civic Platform Impact Report, we read an overwhelming example of dialogue of works. It is beautiful to see on almost every page images and descriptions of the material effect Hizmet has through its organizing and service to the marginalized, disempowered, and in need. We also see in the report, and from our own accounts, as well as our students' accounts, Hizmet's dialogue of life, articulated in a special way through a practice of bringing together people for shared meals. We personally have been shaped by Hizmet families' hospitality of inviting us into their homes for meals. My students' reflections at the end of the semester last spring stated that their most impactful experience of their Christian-Muslim encounter course was the iftar, breaking bread with members of Pacifica in the San Francisco area at their home. There is also an ongoing dialogue of experts, where Hizmet organizes and brings together thought partners and practitioners to educate the public, in most recent years focusing on democracy and respect.
I have been a close friend and partner of the Hizmet Movement since more than 25 years now. First in the Netherlands with the Islam and Dialogue Foundation, later in the DC region of the United States with Rumi Forum. Together with Alper, a Dutch-Turkish friend from the Hizmet, I was able to study Hacı Efendi's Vaazlar, his sermons or lessons, and interview some of his early followers in the region of Izmir. One of the characteristics of the Hizmet that has always intrigued me, but I'm a theologian, so that's what intrigues me, is the natural way in which the movement, and Fethullah Gulen as the one who inspired us all, found a spiritual motivation for his social engagement in the idea of a Riza Allahi. You do more than the usual because you want to live your life in such a way that there can be mutual contentment between God and you. So there is a strong spiritual foundation, but that is seldom explicitly mentioned. In a similar way, the Sohbetler, in which the volunteers of the Hizmet movement come together to discuss their plans for a better society, begin with a common reading of text, often by Said Nursi. So I conclude that this spiritual nourishment, this reading of text as source of inspiration, is a rather natural source of action for the people in the Hizmet movement, but it is seldom explicitly mentioned. That was, I think, understandable, and that is what the people told me, against the background of a secularist Turkish society in which openly talking about religion made one a suspect. But it might need to be reconsidered in an open pluralistic society in which many have no idea of the spiritual roots of why religious choose to engage in social friendship. And yet, our own spiritual masters...
Kate and Pim, I'm sorry to interrupt. You have 3 minutes. Just want to make sure you're watching the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Or Thomas Aquinas or Pope Francis from the Christian side tell us that social friendship is rooted in the relation of friendship with God. So this is an area that needs attention for the future, as you can see on our hypothesis slide.
Our hypothesis is that there is a growing consensus of social friendship as an essential virtue within Hizmet and the NCMD. In an effort to build social friendship, a dialogue of religious experience or spiritual exchange is happening, but there is work to be done to make it explicit and more clearly defined. There may be a shared practice for Hizmet and the NCMD to reflect on that helps to bring this spiritual dialogue into the light. There is a practice in both groups, interreligious textual reading, where instead of offering a dish to a shared meal, participants are bringing texts to offer one another, a practice of exchange that contains within it an invitation of hospitality into one's tradition and a spirit of vulnerability. I did not find reference to it in the annual report, but Rumi Forum's scriptural reasoning was the source of spiritual nourishment that I participated in during the COVID shutdown, meeting online to read and listen to one another. This practice has continued steadily into the present. What is most interesting to me has been the accessibility of content, in that while there is often 3 experts or authorities from the 3 traditions reading the text to a larger audience, there is an openness of exchange where the experts do not set the boundaries, and a community of religious exchange forms in real time. In this practice hosted by Rumi Forum, we see possibly an extension of the Sonipat practice of reading text that then orients action. For the National Catholic Muslim Dialogue, there's something similar happening. Dr. Zari Toprak and Dr. Pim Valkenburg in fall 2024 engaged in a direct text reading with the members of the National Catholic Muslim Dialogue, which was a first. Dr. Valkenburg focused on Fratelli Tutti as a core text, and Dr. Zari Toprak shared the treatise on brotherhood written by Nursi. This practice of intertextual reading has gained momentum in the context of Muslim Catholic dialogue in the last decades, evolving from scriptural reasoning movement to selecting thematic focused texts from the 3 traditions. From a Catholic perspective, this grows out of a tradition of Lectio Divina, a practice of slow, careful reading, a listening to this text. The text reading of selected texts was new for this dialogue, and with it was also the time spent reflecting on the significance of listening as a means to create trust. The emphasis on listening to the text, listening to one another, intended to move from contending against one another to the point where we find ourselves contending together on the great questions of God, humanity, and broader creation. Now, some of us who are in the National Catholic Muslim Dialogue are also connected both to the Hizmet Movement, and we're involved in a next phase of our study, reading selected texts on friendship and difference.
I'm very sorry, you need to conclude.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, the last 30 seconds or so. We are bringing together texts on friendship from within each of our traditions with the intention to extend intra-tradition sources to interreligious learning and to boundaries and the limits of that extension. What we are trying to do in this next phase is to name the process of spiritual reflection, where our group articulates in what way reading text together becomes a dialogue of religious exchange. Our guiding questions for this process are asking what can and cannot be done in a dialogue of spiritual exchange, and where is there resistance to naming where it is already happening. We'll hope to report back on what we learn.
Please join me in thanking the professors for the presentation. Thank you guys very much for joining us. And we move now to our second speaker,